I want to talk about Xinjiang, but before that, Bill, you mentioned Huawei, and I have to say I go back and forth on this. There's a lot of people who think, even people who are not supporters of President Trump, that he's absolutely right to go very hard on Huawei and to try to lobby the rest of the world to the U.S. side because the internet is breaking into two. There are others who look at the arrest of Ms. Meng and think there's no way that politics are not involved here. How should we regard, or how do you regard the Huawei case and the implications of what's happening now?
Well, this is just one technology. There are others, quantum computing, many other technologies the Chinese are working on. This is the first time they have surprised us by being able to roll out globally a technology where we don't have an offering. So the Trump administration is trying to slow this down through political pressure, through the arrest of Ms. Meng, through the publicity surrounding Huawei's attack on the T-Mobile lab in Washington State. But it's too late. Basically, the countries around the world see this technology as attractive and as low priced, and we don't have a really good technological offering to compete with it. So the heart of the problem is that China takes a long-term 5 and 10-year development scheme toward these transformational technologies, and we don't. So when they hit with something like this 5G capability, we're left without any really good response.
Tiff, you think it's all politics, or are there legitimate concerns here?
Well, I think it's politics, and I think there are legitimate concerns, and I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't be mixed together. There's an element. Yeah, is there a back door? Are they monitoring us? Probably. Of course, the U.S. knows how to do that and has done that with its own telecom companies, as we know, through Snowden and others. But of course, there's politics in it, and I mean they call it Made in China 2025, which was, they talk about it less now, but it's sort of their clarion call to build a global technological power with world competitive companies that will not just take market share from the American companies and European companies at home, but will do it around the world. That's also something that the Trump administration has spoken out against, and it's political. It's a rising power, very powerful already now, China, and some people might say declining power, butting up against each other. So I do think politics is very much a part of it as well.
Sophie, you just mentioned your report on Xinjiang, and Huawei is an active player in the smart cities and the surveillance technologies. Could you maybe just outline to start the discussion about surveillance, what's happening in Xinjiang now?
Sure. Although, if I can add just one thought about the Huawei debate, I guess I'm a little bit puzzled by this discussion, or maybe it's the politics that we're talking. To me, it's different politics that are interesting, and it's the reality that Chinese companies are obliged by law to hand data over to the Chinese government if it asks for it, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about inside or outside China. So, yeah, I mean, yes, we can talk about whether the Trump administration is pursuing this for reasons other than, the integrity of 5G networks and, a profound respect for users' privacy. I say that with tremendous sarcasm. But I was in Australia last summer, and there was a full-page ad in one of the newspapers that said, 1 in every 2 Australians already relies on Huawei. And I found myself thinking, does 1 in every 2 Australians realize that their data is at risk of being shipped off to China? Right? I mean, that's the conversation I don't see governments having quite honestly with lots of people that must take place. Anyway, on Xinjiang.
Can I just say that if Huawei were sitting here, they would say, and not that it's my job to talk for them, but they would say that no one has ever been able to prove that that's happened, and the UK and other governments have done extensive testing, and if anything that we see from the Snowden documents, it's in American companies that we're surveilling.
Well, look, I'm proud to say that Human Rights Watch does plenty of work on abuses by American and Western companies of data privacy violations. So we're good on that front. But can I also just say, we didn't see this coming 2 years ago. So just because we hadn't found evidence of it doesn't mean that it isn't a problem, right? And I think Beijing is perfectly good at creating, the legal veneer to do lots of different things so that when the time comes that lever needs to be pulled, they can say, here's the law that makes this, an appropriate step. Very quickly on Xinjiang, this is the northwestern region of China that has now a roughly 50% ethnic minority population, Turkic Muslims, that the Chinese government has long regarded with, at best, suspicion and at worst, a commitment to the idea that these people are politically disloyal. And since a new party secretary who had presided over multiple different kinds of human rights violations in Tibet was moved over to Xinjiang, in 2016, the authorities there started a new Strike Hard campaign, and that's turned into mass arbitrary detention of, we believe up to about 1 million, primarily Uyghurs, other ethnic Turkic Muslims, largely because they're Uyghurs. There's no legal basis for these detentions. There's no process for challenging the fact that you're being held. And we've documented people being held for weeks and months at a time and forced to spend their days studying Xi Jinping thought and other Chinese Communist Party ideology, singing patriotic songs, and being forced to study Mandarin, and of course not being allowed to worship consistent with their faith. And people have no idea how long they're going to be there. And I think it's also worth pointing out that the conditions for Uyghurs outside the camps in Xinjiang isn't a whole lot better. Pervasive restrictions on movement, religion, peaceful expression, you name it.